opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Andrew, is there anyone on the public line?
There is. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak at this time? Hearing none.
Any members of the public? Okay. Moving on to the next item, consideration and approval of a recommendation the board accept that certain interim trial balance review proposal by Cohen Resnick. John Henshaw, do you want to give a brief introduction to this item?
Sure. So it's my understanding that in their meeting with the auditors in last month's meeting, the audit committee requested a proposal to do an interim trial balance review. And the auditors put together a proposal that has a not to exceed price of $4,875 to provide that review. And we have that before us for approval.
Great, thanks, John. So you'll all no doubt recall this discussion at our last meeting. We requested that Cohen Resnick submit a proposal, which they've done. It's been reviewed by myself, by Tom Patton, by John Henshaw. We all agree that the scope is in accordance with what we requested. My assessment is the cost is reasonable for this benefit, and we'll discuss shortly kind of how we'll modify our budget to accommodate it, although we certainly have available resources this fiscal year. Tom, I don't know if you wanted to add anything since you had a conversation or two with Melissa from Cohen Resnick on the scope.
Yeah, so we talked about the scope of the project. I think what we thought would be appropriate was for them to come in and do an interim analysis. And we think that we've got the trial balance updated on a weekly basis, but we'd rather find out whether or not we need additional coaching before we get into year end. It's the type of project that doesn't lend itself to a fixed fee necessarily, so we're going to do it on an hourly basis. They expect it to be 10 to 15 hours of work, if that, and that's why we've ended up with a maximum of 48.70. So I think it's reasonable. It's right within our scope, and likely would be less than that maximum.
Good to hear. Not to exceed. That's great.
Not to exceed.
Great. So
at least not to exceed without approval.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. And so you'll see when we get to the finance committee agenda how we shift around some resources to budget for this, but we obviously have room overall, so this expenditure would be outside the current budget, but we expect to rectify that later in this meeting. So I'll entertain a motion in a second, and then we can have any discussion if it's warranted. Is there a motion to approve?
So David, I'll move to approve it.
Yeah. Okay. Moved by Tom. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by John. Any questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that will move on to the board for final approval. Now we'll move on to the agenda for the Audit, Compliance, and Governance Committee, which should be brief, and then we'll get to the Finance Committee agenda. Item 5A, discussion of mid-year conference with independent auditor. I don't know, is there anything, John Henshaw, is there anything beyond what we just discussed that we wanted to cover here?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. So next is 5B is the update on State Contracting Standards Board. Maybe I'll take a stab at this, and then John, you can add in anything. We've continued to have productive private meetings with members of the board. Most recently, we might have reported on this at our December meeting. I can't recall, but we met with them in early December to talk in some depth. Long story short, on the procurement policy, we came back to them and said that the policy that they sent us as proposed precedent from the State Department of Education, which was 150 pages or so, we thought was inappropriate and unworkable given the scale of our organization and the fact that we are a quasi. And we put the onus on them, which they accepted, to track change our existing document. And if there are ways in which they think that our procurement policy can be tightened, in which our procedures can be more effective, we are all ears. But we really ask them to proactively make those recommendations. And they indicated that they're continuing to look at the procurement related to the concession agreement from 2018, and that they really wanted to see unredacted RFP responses. And we told them that, one, we needed to make sure with our counsel that they're entitled to unredacted, since it's a risk there in sending them things that are exempt from FOIA and transmitting them, having them in another place. And we want to make sure that they would be subsequently protected. But more importantly, we told them that if what they're trying to do is assess our procurement policies and the way in which those policies play out in the real world, that they should take a broader view of that procurement. And we volunteered that they should, in addition to the RFP responses, be sent and review the RFPs, the questions and answers with our consultant and their prospective respondents, the responses, the review panel, the scoring, the interviews, the questions, the totality of the way in which the selection was done. Remarkably, one of their board members said that wasn't necessary. They just wanted the RFP responses. But we said, no, we're going to send everything, because you really need a totality in order to effectively assess the procurement, which we're confident was well implemented. We sent and we confirmed with our counsel that they are entitled to unredacted responses, and so all of the business information that would be exempted from FOIA was able to be shared with them. And so in mid to late December, we transmitted a tremendous amount of material to them, basically the entire procurement file related to the concession agreement. And we're somewhat surprised that they came back to us about a week ago saying that they have a draft report that they're preparing for the legislature on the Port Authority. We haven't received any recommendations on our procurement. I find it unrealistic that they would have effectively digested all of the materials that we sent them last month, but it is what it is. And they said that they would send us that draft report later this week for our review and comment, with the intent to send it to the legislature first thing next month. We responded requesting that we get the report as early as possible so that we have time to review, and did not receive a response to that request. They had a public meeting this past Friday where they stated that the report was drafted. And interestingly, one board member made a comment that they still have some lingering questions. I sent a follow-up to their board chair and executive director saying, if you have questions, please, by all means, reach out, talk to us, ask us questions, ask us for clarification. We have no doubt that you have questions coming from the materials that we've sent you. We find it hard to believe that you have this report ready. Send it to us. Send us things. Let us provide feedback. They indicated that they have a committee meeting, the committee that's dedicated to us, remarkably, this morning, and that they would aim to send us the draft report tomorrow. So I don't, we don't know what to expect. I really don't know what is going to be in this report. I really don't know why they've chosen to allocate their admittedly limited resources towards reassessing our procurement from 4 years ago rather than focusing on helping us tighten up our policies to mitigate risk going forward, which I would think would be their primary objective. But long story short, we just got to wait and see, and we'll share with you all what is in this report and what our response is, and depending on the nature and the conclusions of the report, hopefully we have some minor edits, and it ends up helping us be a better authority going forward. But if it's really off base, then we're going to have a different approach. And it's I'll editorialize just to say it's a little bit frustrating given that the tenor around the project is finally changing course to be rehashing stuff from 4 years ago. We'd like to move on, and hopefully this report is a tool that enables us to do so, but I'm not, frankly, optimistic.
David, I guess we're going to have to run this past our attorneys too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to have to run past OPM. It's going to have to run past our attorneys. We'll see what's in it. They seem reluctant to acknowledge the role that OPM has played in helping us with our policies and over the last couple of years. But I don't want to jump. I think I've given you my fears, but I don't want to jump to too strong conclusions till we see the document later this week. But it is potentially it's worrisome. It's worrisome. And this
will you share that with the entire committee as soon as you get it?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
And was it just the general policies or specific contract that they're focusing on? Do you know?
We don't know what the report is going to cover. I can say that 80% of our conversation with them has been clear that their focus is on this 2018 procurement that resulted in the selection of Gateway, and it seems to be driven by one board member. There's another board member who governs, as I said, maybe 20% of the conversation around our procurement policies, and that back and forth has been equally frustrating. He said multiple times that we don't have a procurement policy, and we kept pointing him to where it exists. They, were very critical of it, and we said we think it's appropriate for an agency of our size and being a quasi, and we had OPM's help in updating it. And they continue to say publicly we don't have a procurement policy, which is demonstrably false. And in response to our request for guidance, they sent us, as I said, a 175-page document from the State Department of Education, and we countered and said, we don't think you understand our situation if you think this is at all applicable to us. But so, long story short, I hope that this report is broader and includes concrete recommendations around our procurement policy, and that would actually be helpful. But I fear that it's going to be singularly focused on this 2018 procurement. But again, it's speculative.
You think we need an emergency meeting of us ourselves for any input from the committee?
We may, particularly since some of you were around at that time. I mean, we're also limited by the fact that, amongst us core staff, John and I were not there. So, we have our remote assessment of the process in hindsight, which we're confident in, but we weren't there. So yeah, that could be. Let us see what's in there, and let us circulate it, and we can have a little conversation by email and determine whether or not it's necessary to come together.
Good. Great.
And John. This is John Flores, and the contracting standards board is saying they're obligated to do a report to the legislature about us.
I don't know that they're obligated to do so. Listen, they seem to have made a political calculus that demonstrating their worth relative to mitigating risk at the Port Authority is their most effective strategy to gain additional resources that they've been seeking for some time. I don't fault them for that. What I have issue with is they seem to be ignoring their responsibilities that are helpful to us going forward and focusing instead in the rearview mirror. But hopefully, listen, we've had very positive discussions with them. I want to be clear. All of our meetings with them have been positive. There just has been a bit of a disconnect between the content of those meetings and the way in which we are portrayed at their public meetings.
I think we all got to remember it's an election year this year. So I think that could play a small role.
Yep. Listen, as I said, we did not fight to being, under their purview. We didn't object to it. We worked very hard, I think, to try and demonstrate our commitment to having a positive working relationship with them. And we've been very, I think, proactive in requesting of them the technical support in the areas where, based on our read of statute, they're meant to be guiding us. We haven't gotten that yet in the concrete way that there's anything that we can act on.
Well, we'll read their report. We'll see what they have to say.
Yep. Hopefully we will get it tomorrow. Other comments or questions? John Henshaw, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. All right. Any old business related to audit, compliance, and governance? Okay. Any new business? All right. Then let's move on to the Finance Committee agenda. First, 6A, insurance coverage presentation. So, John,
Just by way of some background, one of the major budget adjustments we're making has to do with insurance, and mostly having to do with project-related insurance.